A long-awaited groundbreaking got underway last week. Fort Mose was North America's first free, legally sanctioned black community and was a destination for enslaved people fleeing south, primarily from the Carolinas. I'm joined now by Charles Ellis, president of the Fort Mose Historical Society Board, and Chip Storey, a local historian. Welcome to both of you. Thanks for being here.
Thank you very much for having us. This is an exciting time for Fort Mose and the area.
Chip, tell us a little bit about the significance of this groundbreaking. What is the role that Fort Mose plays in the local history of the city of St. Augustine and Black history?
Well, this is a major, this being Fort Mose, a major milestone. People who were determined to become free, leaving the British colonies and coming to Spanish Florida, despite significant odds, marshes, the danger of being enslaved people and possibly killed or severely punished for running away. And they got to St. Augustine, where the Spanish, for political reasons, gave them the opportunity to be free and have their own community and their own land. So this is it's an amazing breakthrough, because you're talking about the early 18th century. So we're very proud of it.
And Charles Ellis, you're the president of the Fort Mose Historical Society Board. This groundbreaking last week, obviously you were there. Tell me a little bit about the excitement that there is just about starting this project.
Well, I really can't begin. It's so exciting to come to this moment. When we think about when the society was formed back in 1996, and the thought of having a fort was one of the big dreams that we had planned for, and to come up to the point of this past Thursday and Friday, when we actually had the groundbreaking. This process started back around 2012, thinking about building the fort. And one of the things that we felt about the fort is that it would certainly give us the opportunity to support the visitors and also the world about what this fort represents and what it means to the society, and also what it means to the Florida State Park or St. Augustine, Florida.
So Fort Mose is located about 2 miles north of St. Augustine. It was built in 1738. It was destroyed a couple years later, then rebuilt. But then it sort of languished and disappeared into the marsh. It wasn't really rediscovered until the mid-'80s. And like, as you say, at that time, the idea of rebuilding was a very distant dream.
It was a distant dream, but the society itself, which was formulated back in 1996, we started the programs of having a Flight to Freedom, this reenactment, mimicking the programs that brought this project to St. Augustine. And when we think about the journey that those folks, the enslaved people, took to come to St. Augustine to get their freedom, and when we tell that story, it really is a very passionate story. And so by having the fort there will certainly amplify the fact that this story is really about freedom. It's about the determination that the enslaved people had to come to St. Augustine. And so building this fort will certainly be a big step in improving and also letting the folks know what an exciting event that this is going to be for St. Augustine.
And Chip Storey, the history of this place, we talk about, in the 1700s when this fort was built, but there's some indication that enslaved people began arriving as early as 1687 as they were seeking refuge, and describe what that journey would have been like.
Well, sure. The reason people started coming was that word had gotten out that Spain was willing to give people freedom or sanctuary if they were willing to come to this part of the continent and become Catholic. And that it was a big deal, again, for folks who were enslaved. But it did mean going through marshes, and it did mean, on occasion, taking a canoe down to St. Augustine from the Carolinas, 200 miles. It meant being endangered by, rattlesnakes and alligators. and slave hunters. Let's not forget that. There were people out there with guns trying to recapture these people. When they got to Florida, they were, for the early period, you're talking about the late 1600s, not necessarily given anything other than temporary sanctuary, and sometimes they were recaptured. But in 1693, Spain declared that these people who managed to get to Florida would be given freedom and land, provided they became Catholic, and eventually provided that the men served in the militia to protect St. Augustine from the encroaching British. But people in this community, and it was a community, we want to emphasize that, did their own farming, raised their kids, had their own chapel. It really was, in addition to being a fort, a community of freed black folks with their own governor.
Charles, I want to ask you, I mean, you're a reenactor at some of these events yourself.
With the militia, yes.
With the militia. And I wonder if there's a sense in St. Augustine, not just kind of like collective pride that there was this first free black settlement here, but if it has kind of informed the communities that have followed and the generations that have followed in terms of that initial, having that designation as a free person.
Well, when you're talking about, there's a sense of having that form and having that pride of having that location as a community. I think we have to consider the fact that being in a location where you consider yourself as being free and making that journey from the Carolinas down to St. Augustine, and knowing that you will be free once you get to St. Augustine, and also have an opportunity to have a family and also to live with a family again. I think that in itself is a very, very strong determination to make that journey from the Carolinas down to St. Augustine.
If I may, you've touched on the importance of this project, because the history of Fort Mose was long lost. The English eventually got Florida and in the U.S., and what the Spanish did and what they did with a bunch of quote-unquote Africans was not of interest. But this project is resurrecting the memory, and that is what's helping get the word out about this important historical event or historical period. I mean, Fort Mose is designated by the Department of Interior as a National Historic Landmark, and that's a very recent phenomenon. And it is also recognized by UNESCO as a site of memory for enslaved people, which is to say internationally what people who were enslaved experienced. So this is why we're excited about the fort, because to be honest, a lot of St. Augustine and a lot of Jacksonville and a lot of Florida and a lot of the world didn't know about it until people like Charles led the charge.
We should say there's a couple of important series coming up. There's a music series that features Preservation Hall Jazz Band, Wynton Marsalis, Common, Kebmo. There's also performances that are done, The Flight to Freedom, which is February 1st through 3rd. Gentlemen, thank you both so much for being here, doing the important work that you're doing, and congrats on the groundbreaking last week.
Yes, it is. Yes, it is. And thank you.